I got peer reviewed last night on my mask mandate by my mother. She's a nurse. She pointed out that several counties here in Texas have opted out of enforcing the mask mandate, so there might have been a lot of non-compliance. So I looked at those counties specifically. What do you think I found? Well, there's a spoiler alert from looking at the title of this video. Governor Abbott, end this mandate now. You're going to see there's very, very good reason to actively end this mandate and go out of your way to publicly wash your hands of it completely. Now, mind you, when I look at the numbers for these particular counties, lack of enforcement is not the same as lack of compliance. Okay, now, for example, the leaders of Colleyville, which initially thought that they were not going to do it, the city of Colleyville and Tarrant County, they pointed out that people were already wearing masks, especially in spaces where they could maintain their social distancing. Now, I've not seen a follow-up to this article, so as far as I know, they could have started enforcing this already. So let's have a look at those particular counties. For Texas as a whole, we have an average concentration of 441.8 per every 100,000 people. We'll start with Denton County at 227.1, Houston County 209, Montgomery County 392, Gillespie 370.5, Upshur 162.9, Care 277.6, Gregg 358.2. Now, what do all these have in common so far? They're below the average for the state. Nacogdoches is the first exception and the only exception, 44.6, and Panola 112.1. Total average 288.2. Now, the counties that leave the decision to the individual to decide whether or not they're going to wear a mask, they're beating the crap out of the rest of Texas. On the other hand, the following counties require a visit for the Immigration and the Naturalization Service, and they require it right now. Garza, 1155.9. Knox, 927.9. Crockett, 2886.8. This is ridiculous. Valverde, 1262.6. Real, 1883. Maverick, 1045.6. LaSalle, 3510.6. Okay, that's, yeah, get in there right now. I'm tired. These people are not going to pay their hospital bills, I'll bet. Star, 1079.9. Cameron, 1092. Nueces, 1067.9. Calhoun, 1258.8. Jackson, 1273.7. Victoria, 1054.5. DeWitt, 1557.5. Lavaca, 1136.3. Gonzales, 1199.8. Madison, 3458.4. This is just larceny. These people are just stealing from us. Titus County is high, but not extremely so. Still warrants a checkup, 732.8. Now, I've been tracking the data here in Texas in good faith, and now I know that it's all garbage. The majority of this data needs to be thrown out of Texas data. It needs to be treated as part of Mexico's data. Okay? These are obviously Mexicans. And Governor, you're making decisions based on data that include these people. You need to end this mandate right now. And may I add, Mr. President, keep building that wall. But my criticism of the mandate is about to get outright nasty. Because as you may notice, this mask is being used really weird. For example, Denton County, they refused to enforce because it had University of North Texas there, and they had a lot of Black Lives Matter protests. There were some of the protests that blocked off a lot of the streets, and they weren't wearing masks. And they said, well, we're not going to wear masks. You notice how they don't care about that? Yeah, when you look at the data, it's going to make you want to throw up. That's all part of it. It all comes from the data. Okay? Masks affect your personality. They affect the way other people treat you. It's really scary stuff we're going to look at. Governor Abbott, get rid of that mandate. And then I'm going to talk about what happened to me at work that ultimately got me fired from my job. The research in masks has a direct bearing on what happened there. Okay? And the research I'm about to show you proves that what I've been telling you all along is true. Because all the weird stuff that I've been talking about, especially on the July 5th, my Independence Day is supposed to be July 4th, it falls right in line here, just perfectly in line. There's no way that's an accident. Now, there are two different issues here with masks. Now, for example, on homophobia, that's an irrational fear of homosexuals. It typically comes from suppressed homoerotic desire. This is a real thing. It actually happens. But also, the LGBTQ industry also uses it to attack and stigmatize their critics. Okay, so homophobia is both real and it's a weapon. And some of these critics are clearly homophobic. Well, life is a rich tapestry, don't you know? So it's the same thing here with the mask. There is a scientific argument. What I just talked about is, what I'm about to make is an ideological argument against these masks. The scientific argument, there's a growing consensus that they hold, that they take care of the mask. But even that's contaminated by these people because, okay, the short-term benefit is, and by the way, I supported this mandate in the beginning, the short-term benefit is it does hold off the virus, keep down the spread of the virus. Obviously, it didn't work for Texas. There's something else going on. A lot of undermining of this. It's not happening in counties that aren't enforcing the mandate. Republican counties. It's not happening in our counties. But even if it did work, you don't want to work it for long because the long-term danger is your immune system is not getting access to the environment. And so you're going to lose your immune system. And these people are talking about extending this into months or years of wearing masks. And now they're even talking about you wearing it in your home. So there's an agenda here. There's an ideology here. Okay, we're going to look at two different papers here. The first is a dissertation, PhD dissertation from 1990, an empirical and theoretical investigation into the psychological effects of wearing a mask. We're going to follow with possessed by a mask, and that's what this was, a group possession. Every human culture has used masks for ritual disinhibition, shaming, and play. Is being online the ultimate masquerade? This is where you'll see what happens to me, or what happened to me. Because guess what? All of us were wearing masks. We were masks in the plant where this happened, and we were also wearing masks outside of the plant, all around, unless you were actually eating or drinking coffee or something like that. Okay, so all this mask stuff is getting everybody crazy. And I said at the time, it was crazy. And by the way, what happened to me will happen to you if you don't play the game by their rules, to the letter. Doesn't matter who you are, even if you're black. Right now, they pretend like they're your friend and you're the guys they're pushing ahead of the white guys. But when they're done with us, they're going to come after you. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know when I tell you that there's an agenda behind putting white people into masks. At the same time, they're making excuses for black people who don't. You'll see there's a reason for that. Even though black people, you can argue, need the mask more than white people because they're getting hit harder by the virus. Once again, if you're black, they don't care about you. They're just using you. When they're done with us, they're going to come for you. Every conversation about masks, every scientific paper about masks, which is why you have to go back to 1990, long before this, and another one from the early 2000s or 2010s or whatever, even the science has been perverted by these people. Now, as I said, there's a growing consensus that masks still work. Common sense says they should, but they never talk about the fact that you don't want to be wearing them too long because of their effect on your immune system. And then people are telling me, viewers are telling me that there's a buildup of carbon dioxide, it's messing with the environment, you're having a hard time breathing, and of course that's going to affect your immune system. So that it helps and it might be affecting your immune system. So even the growing consensus that's leaving aside the problems with your immune system, even the growing consensus might be perverted. That itself might be perverted. Now, what is their agenda? It's very simple. Shut up, white man. Shut your filthy, lying, racist mouth. Nobody wants to hear from you. Remember watch my video from July 5th? That's the exact phrasing I'm using. That's what they want to do here. Shut up, white man, says this black man, not wearing a mask, bitching and moaning about Donald Trump not wearing a mask. To a white man that he's trying to shut up even as he's trying to answer his questions. Seriously, he's getting testimony for an investigation and he doesn't even want the white man to give him any testimony. Yes or no, yes or no, just answer my question, yes or no. That's all they do. These minorities in Congress that we see nowadays, the Democrats. That's all they do. It's the damnedest thing. There's a reason why nobody talks like that. Not every once in a while, but they all do it all the time. There's a reason for that. You'll see. So we're going to look at the highlights from the first study from the PhD dissertation. It came 1990, decades before the Chinese virus, so it's not contaminated. The study has two sets of data. You'll see them talk about it. There's quantitative data and qualitative data. Numbers and stories. Okay? On a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about such and such? Things like that. That's going to give you a number. It's quantity. Now there's this lady did such and such under such and such circumstances. That's quality. Now think about light. Okay? We have a spectrum. We have a wavelength that gives us a number. Quantity. On the other hand, we have the color blue that you see and that you respond to. Quality. Literally a qualia. Okay? Quantity versus quality. Now here, this is the way the paper works. We have tests, we run the tests, and we get data. And then we posit a series of hypotheses. Do the hypotheses fit the data? So we're just going to run through some of the hypotheses. Okay? Yes or no, yes or no? No, because we're trying to have a conversation, not bury one, which you are clearly doing. You didn't really want to talk to Attorney General Barr, didn't you? You didn't want to hear from him. You don't want to hear from any of us. Well, you better get ready because you're going to be hearing from us because we're getting sick of this bullshit. Line 4.4.1 section, hypothesis 1. The wearing of a mask under conditions in which an individual's identifiability is dependent on immediate facial recognition will lead to a reduction in feelings of identifiability. Both the quantitative and qualitative data strongly support this hypothesis. Section 4.4.2, hypothesis 2. The wearing of a mask under conditions in which it reduces an individual's identifiability and under conditions in which positive external events are not forthcoming will contribute to a reduction in feelings of public self-awareness. So are people who are wearing masks less likely to care about what you think? The qualitative and quantitative data in this study also strongly support this hypothesis. Section 4.4.3, hypothesis 3. The wearing of a public mask under conditions in which it reduces an individual's public self-awareness and under conditions in which an individual wishes to behave in ways that are contrary to their public self-standard will have a disinhibiting effect. Okay, are you going to do what you otherwise wouldn't do if you weren't wearing a mask? Are you going to defame the character of William Robert Crapick III and slander and libel him? Would you have done that if you weren't wearing a mask? In contrast to the two previous hypotheses, the findings from this study do not provide strong support for this hypothesis. They go on to say, so Bill, it did make a difference for you. Just wait. This then leaves two possibilities. Either hypothesis 3 is incorrect, or else the quantitative measures failed to adequately test it. So the questions that you asked to get your quantity numbers, they weren't adequately framed. From the qualitative data, that explanation, the latter explanation, seems more likely. This would seem to reinforce the point made in section 3.2.2.3.2 that for masks to disinhibit its wearer, the wearer must want to behave in a way that is discrepant from her public self-standard. Moreover, given that the wearing of a mask seems to reduce particular rather than global public self-concerns, it would follow that the wearing of a mask is only likely to disinhibit those particular behaviors, which are discrepant with the particular public self-standard, over which the mask wearer has reduced concern. Such a prediction is verified by the qualitative data. Sounds weird, but basically it's just only the things that people care about are they more likely to do if they're not wearing a mask. Participant 42, for example, felt less concerned about being seen to lie when wearing a mask. Therefore, she felt more able to bend the truth when she was speaking. But there's no evidence that she also felt more able to behave in an aggressive manner or disclose more personal information about herself. Now, what does that mean? It means that they wanted to defame my character and slander and libel my name, and they had for quite a while. I assure you they had. And my company not only poured gasoline on that fire, they worked very hard to make sure it burned me out of my job, which is why they're responsible for all of this. And I will hold them responsible, and I believe the courts will too. Section 5.4.1, hypothesis 1. If an individual has a desire to behave in a particular way, but inhibits that behavior out of concern for maskable facets of their public self, then when wearing a mask, under conditions in which it reduces those concerns, can be predicted to have a disinhibiting effect. So if you want to do something that you won't because you're not masked, would you have those inhibitions if you were masked? You would not be as inhibited. You would be disinhibited. However, if an individual wishes to behave in a way for which they require maskable facets of their public self, then the wearing of a mask can be predicted to have an inhibiting effect. But if you wanted to do something and you relied on the features that could be masked to do it, and you put on the mask, would you be as willing to do it? Not as willing. You would be inhibited. As with the study in Chapter 4, the qualitative data from this study clearly indicates that a mask can serve to both inhibit and disinhibit its wearer. So you're more likely to attack me if you're masked if you're up to no good and you don't want to be held responsible for it. But you're less likely to attack me when you're masked and you want to attack me, but you're honorable and have good reason to attack me to my face. Section 7.4.1, Hypothesis 1. The wearing of a mask under conditions in which an individual is aware of their facial appearance will lead to a transformation in the direction represented by the mask. If you are aware of your facial appearance, wearing a mask will make you start acting more like the mask. So from here on out, this is the part where you're going to want to vomit. This is when it gets very, very strange. Think about the ramifications if what I said is just true. And it is true. If your mask is imposed on you by an alien outsider who hates you, which is clearly what's going on here, he will likewise impose his agenda on your personality. This is an automatic psychological reaction. You have no control over that. Shut the hell up, white man. It will lead to a transformation in the direction represented by their mask. The results of this study provide mixed support for the above hypothesis. Okay? You know how they go out of their way to let Black Lives Matter get away with not wearing these masks? And when you saw the Barr testimony, Attorney General William Barr, and Jerry Adler was yelling at the white guys, wear a mask, wear a mask, making a big deal out of it, here's where it comes. Okay, the results of this study provide mixed support for the above hypothesis. On the one hand, there is evidence that when an individual is acutely aware of their masked face, they will experience a transformation in the direction represented by the mask. Put on a mask, put on a mask, you're infecting me. And that scene where they're just like, we can't even drink coffee? Okay, on the other hand, it would seem that when an individual is wearing a mask but is not made acutely aware of their mask appearance, then the transformation in the direction represented by the mask does not take place. And then they go on to explain why it certainly does not take place. So if they really cared about protecting you from the virus, if they really cared about compliance, because when you're being attacked, you're not gonna comply. How would they pass this off? Okay, they would make it a big deal. So yeah, we're gonna go over. Oh, and here's a mask. Would you mind? We got a COVID. Thank you so much. Something like that. You go because you want to be helpful. If they really cared about the mask for health purposes, remember, there's the ideological mask question and there's the scientific mask question. Even the science has been contaminated. But make it non-ideological if you really cared, but they don't. They make a big deal out of white man put that mask on so you can shut your lying, filthy, racist mouth. Okay. You know they all read this paper, right? This is part of a plan. Section 7.4.2, Hypothesis 2. The wearing of a mask under conditions in which an individual is aware that their face is no longer their face will lead a transformation away from their usual self. This is the obvious corollary. If you're going to the mask, you're going from you. Okay? Because the data from the quantitative measure looks at specific effects, it cannot really be used to assess this hypothesis. However, there is some data from the qualitative responses which provide some support for this hypothesis. From the responses coded under Dimension 1, usualness of feeling, it is clear that participants felt less like usual in the mask plus mirror conditions and in the mask conditions than in the non-mask conditions. So when looking in a mirror wearing a mask or just wearing a mask, you're much more likely to feel less like you than you would when you're not wearing a mask. Hypothesis 1. Section 8.4.1. The wearing of a mask will transform how mask wear is perceived, such that observers will tend towards perceiving her in terms of the psychological characteristics represented by the mask, not by them. This is going to play a role in how I was treated. So not only will this hostile alien impose his agenda on your psyche, but people will start treating you the way he wants them to treat you. Shut the hell up, white man. Get your mask on. Get your mask on, filthy man. Congressman Nadler, that of course is a social feedback loop that will reinforce his agenda on your psyche, because we're social creatures, which will in turn reinforce your behavior. Shut the hell up, white man. The finding from this study provides strong support for this hypothesis. The validity of this finding is strengthened by 3 further aspects from this study. Not only is it true, it's super true. First, even though participants were instructed to focus away from the mask, it seems that it still had a significant effect on how the participants perceive the mask wear. So even when we're told, don't look at the mask, this stuff is automatic. That's why they're doing it, because it works. And you're good to resist this. Second, in looking at the mean scores for each individual photographs. The differences between the 2 conditions seems to be very much related to the relative prominence of the mask's facial expressions in each of the photographs. Due to some technical difficulties, the expressions on the mask of the 4th and 7th photograph were somewhat difficult to see. See Appendix 8A. And it is here that one finds 2 of the smallest differences between the 2 conditions. So the photos where they couldn't see the mask very well, the difference between the way they thought about you with and without the mask was very small. Okay? Third, many participants' responses in the post-experimental debriefing indicated that the mask did indeed affect how they perceived the mask wearer. They said, yeah, I know you told us to ignore it, but we couldn't ignore it. You can't ignore it. The side of white people wearing masks and black people not wearing masks, you can't ignore that. You know who's boss, don't you? Section 9.4.1, Hypothesis 1. The wearing of a mask under conditions in which an individual is focused on their facial appearance will lead to a transformation in the direction represented by the mask through a self-attributional process. You're going to do it yourself. When you wear their mask, you will instinctively, reflexively, viscerally, unconsciously agree with the agenda they've invested in that mask. Will you do that? Will you agree with the opinion that they want you to have about you? Yes. You have to actively go out of your way to subvert that. We have to fight these masks. Because otherwise it's going to be shut the hell up, white man. And then they're going to get busy. They're going to get busy. They're going to get very busy. The findings of this study would seem to provide relatively strong support for this hypothesis. Participants in the mask plus mirror conditions compared with participants in non-mask conditions rated themselves as both significantly more like and significantly less different to the person represented in the mask. 9.4.2, Hypothesis 2. The wearing of a mask, under conditions in which an individual is aware that their face is no longer their face, will lead to a transformation away from the usual self through a self-attributional process. Can your hostile alien enemy disorient you psychologically by imposing your mask on you, thereby weakening your foundations, your normal default attitude, and impose on you another default attitude, their agenda? Yes. And once again, you're naturally going to fall in line with this. The findings from this study showed that the wearer of a mask significantly reduced participants' rating. The wearing of a mask significantly reduced participants' rating and how much they felt like their usual or normal self. This is scary stuff. Given the extremely low probability of this finding emerging by chance, it is unlikely that this was a false positive result as a consequence of skewed distribution. And then they have a final quote. Kellerman and Laird, therefore, would seem to be correct to suggest that we redefine ourselves each time we attend to our attributes, and that a seemingly innocuous change in our appearance can change the way we feel about ourselves. It's just a mask, white man. Can't you wear a mask? Are you that much of a stone cold killer? You're going to kill grandma, you can't even wear a mask? Put on your mask, you're going to make me sick. Jerry Nadler, talking to the white man when they were doing William Barr, interviewing William Barr yesterday. Killer. plague bearer. That's exactly what that black woman said about me at work. Exactly. I'm not making this up. And they further add, now, not only may the psychological effects of wearing a mask be the clearest demonstration of this, but it also be one of the most effective ways of extending this theory into clinical practice, or into subversion, or into race war against your enemies. So now we're going to go into the other paper. Again, possessed by a mask. We're going to finish with quotes from that. Okay, we're going to see, in this paper, we're going to see a lot of what we just read in action. And it's going to be kind of weird. This is the power of masks. This is what we're dealing with. I mean, I laugh at this because masks are not all evil. You know, there's a war in heaven and earth, and we're all using the same weapons. But this is why what we're dealing with, you need to take it seriously. We need to, Governor Abbot not only needs to get rid of the mandate, he needs to actively, vigorously repudiate it. Okay. One Igbo mask wearer explained, if I carry it, that is, wear a mask, what I see other people do not see. If a gallon of palm wine is brought in and put into my mouth, I can finish it, and another person cannot. I understand people differently because when I look at them, my eyes will be spirit eyes, not like people's eyes. Here's another one. Johnston reported that masks have personalities that persist, regardless of the wearer. This stuff is powerful. One mask with a droopy nose liked to pick up sticks and hit people, regardless of who wore it. Another liked to perch on the very edge of chairs and fall off. Isn't that odd? A mask also had to grow up, just like a person. A new mask is like a baby that knows nothing about the world. Very often a mask will have to learn how to sit or bend down or how to hold things. They don't know how to take the lids off jars. They don't understand the idea of wrapping things. Given a present, they just admire the paper. When objects fall to the floor, it's as if they cease to exist. One student always left the room before wearing a particularly regressive mask. I had to ask her why, and she says, it's silly, but I'm afraid I might wet myself, so I always go to the toilet. Okay, all right, now, here's where I come in. Here's what happened to me on that work day. Oh my God, it fit like a glove. I knew I read this right. Now I know and I knew it was by design, but now I know what the design was. Here we go. Occasionally we find masks imposed as punishments. The most famous perhaps being the scold's bridle, or branks, invented in 16th century Scotland before spreading through Europe. This was a metal cage that fitted over the face, with a spike that went into the mouth, preventing its wearer from speaking, which sometimes damaged the tongue and palate. It was used to penalize social misdemeanors such as lying, spreading gossip, or nagging, usually though not exclusively in women. Once fitted with the bridle, the woman was then led in on a chain to a public place where she could be insulted and pelted with rotten vegetables and excrement by her neighbors. In Germany, similar devices were known as Schandmaskers, or shame masks, and made to resemble animal faces. Cruder contraptions of this kind were used to punish slaves who tried to escape in Africa and in the Americas. You know that slavery in Africa too, right? Just so you know. Here we go. Updated and transferred online. Now this is talking about online bullying, but this is what happened to me at work. Both the Masked Avenger and the Schandmask appear in the phenomenon of internet shaming, where it was a crowd of strangers, in this case they were masked, and this is the internet as a mask, come together to punish someone, usually for an offensive statement. But they have to be primed for that. I mean, I said something they could say, well, it's your fault. It's like, no, you primed them for that. This statement should have been innocuous among sane people. These campaigns can quickly escalate from insults to death threats or threaten, if he doesn't leave the fab, I will. Because he's filthy. It almost always includes demands that the target be fired from their job, demands that are often gratified by intimidated employees. Yeah. An essential part of internet shaming is that the target is reduced to a single definition. They are to wear the mask of the sexist or the racist, or the angry feminist or the race baiter, or the fag, or whatever. All parties can and do this. Let this be understood. I might be saying things about black folks here, but there are plenty of things I can say about white folks. Okay? Then, just as with the medieval scold's bridle, a mob gathers to throw filth and insults at the idea represented by the mask. The other qualities of its wearer and the suffering they experience remain out of sight and mind. And then what happened? The lady in charge from India, why are you here? What are you in charge of personnel for? I'm sure you're a nice lady, but can we get somebody who knows the local culture to do this job? The way she scolded me, and the way the vice president of human resources says, you just need to move on, Bill. You just need to move on. Why do you want to continue with this? What is your goal? Trying to talk me out of move forward. This really hurt. I put a lot of work into trying to fight the COVID virus, and then I'm just called a racist and just says I'm trying to kill black folks. That's what happened here. Now, as I said, this isn't all evil, but masked figures can also represent the justice of the powers that be. Among various African peoples, masks are worn by elders when they adjudicate disputes. I like that. We do it too. The wigs worn by British jurists fit with this category. By donning their wigs, barristers and judges signals that they are no longer speaking for themselves. Their opinions and verdicts are those of authority incarnate. I like that. I like that. I saw a commentator on the internet talk about how they don't wear wigs anymore in the House. He thought that was horrible, and I agree. The elders must wear the mask. You must wear the mask. You must speak for your ancestors. You must speak for authority. You must speak for your people. That's very important. But as I said, there's a war going on in heaven and on earth. Both sides are using the same weapons. A doctor can heal, or he can torture really well. A psychologist can liberate, or he can bind to his agenda with a flimsy little mask.